proceed to our third topic, the stimulus.
I think the stimulus bill, well, first of all, I was committed to responding to the crisis of Florida in this country. And we'll talk about that on the back end of the question. I think that it's also important to know that we would have gone into a depression versus a recession if it was not for the stimulus package. Public educators, we were able to save public education jobs, public educators in Florida. We were able to assist cities in being able to provide the very needs that their constituents need. We were able to also put forth a great footprint here in the state of Florida as it relates to high-speed rail, some $1.25 billion that has gone between the rail system of Orlando and Tampa. I think it's important to know that transportation is key to the growth of jobs in Florida and also being able to attract jobs to Florida, and it's been one of our Achilles heels. I think it's important that we also look at this whole question of the tax cuts for the middle class and the relief that took place to Social Security recipients that were really going through hard times in '09. Again, this economic meltdown came about as it relates to the failure of Wall Street.
This has been a big issue in the campaign so far, and it is the issue of your support in February of 2009 when President Obama was fighting for it. And here's the famous, some would say infamous picture of the hug when you came out and supported the Obama stimulus package. By the start of this year, Florida had received $8.2 billion in stimulus funds. Governor Crist says that has created or saved 87,000 jobs, including 26,000 teaching jobs. Before I let Governor Crist answer, Mr. Rubio, why is $8 billion and 87,000 jobs bad for a state that has 12% unemployment?
Well, here's what's bad. If it's bad for America, it can't possibly be good for your state. Let me tell you why the stimulus has failed. The stimulus has failed because since that famous day in February, where the governor campaigned with Barack Obama on behalf of the stimulus program, 211,000 Floridians have lost their jobs. Today, just this week it was announced, we have the highest unemployment rate in Florida's history. But here's the centerpiece of the stimulus debate that we need to talk about. We're running for the United States Senate. And so the choice for Republicans in Florida is, do you want a candidate that would have stood up to Barack Obama, voted against the stimulus, and supported something that would have cost less money and created more jobs? If that's the candidate you want, that would be me. Or do you want the next Republican senator from Florida to be someone who would have voted with the Democrats for the stimulus package? And that candidate would be Governor Crist. That's really the choice.
And also, how do you respond to the fact that despite the stimulus, this week, as Mr. Rubio points out, unemployment in Florida is at an all-time high, a recorded high, 12.2%.
Now, what I want to talk about, though, is the fact that my opponent talks about, we need to look at spending. Well, I think we need to look at spending. Look at the record of my opponent when it comes to what he was paid as a lobbyist. My opponent was a lobbyist while he served in the Florida House of Representatives.
Can we please, I'd like an answer to the question about the stimulus.
Yeah, well, I think I've answered it. We utilize those monies just like Haley Barbour did in Mississippi, just like Sonny Perdue did in Georgia, some of these wild-eyed liberals who understood they have a duty to the people of their state. They have to put people above politics. And as governor, you've got to make tough decisions. I made the tough decision to utilize these funds to help the people of Florida. I know the unemployment rate is bad. I know the economy is tough. I understand all of that. If we had taken the Speaker's approach, we would have 87,000 more people on top of that 12% that would be unemployed in Florida today. 20,000 of those, as you indicated, school teachers who are teaching our children. That's awfully important for us to be able to continue to do that.
Let me follow up, and then I'm going to let Mr. Rubio respond. Only 3 Republicans in the U.S. Senate voted for the Obama stimulus when it passed in 2009. Olympia Snowe, Susan Collins, and Arlen Specter. Are you saying that if you had been a senator, a Republican senator in the U.S. Senate in 2009, you would have voted for the stimulus?
Yeah, that's pretty clear. I mean, I think it was the right thing to do at the time. You have to go back and remember what was happening in our economy. It was literally falling off the cliff. I mean, some of these, ideas to try to prop up our economy, frankly, began under the Bush administration, President Bush. It was the TARP. They wanted to make sure our financial institutions did not collapse, that people didn't have to have fear and a run on the banks or something of that nature. And when it came to the stimulus, it was money to help our economy. Things have started to stabilize now, and they're getting better in Florida.
Mr. Rubio.
Well, I don't know how you define stability. Having the highest unemployment rate in Florida's history is certainly not stability, especially to the 1 out of 10 Floridians that can't find a job. The stimulus is a failure. And I think in this conversation we've established a critical difference in this campaign. If I had been in Washington, D.C. as a U.S. Senator, I would have voted against the stimulus. I would have fought on behalf of alternatives that were offered by Republicans that would have cost less money and would have promoted more jobs, quite frankly. Had Charlie Crist been in the U.S. Senate, he would have voted for the stimulus. And so for Florida Republicans, the choice is pretty clear. Do you want your next U.S. Senator to be someone like me or like the gentleman that you've named to the U.S. Senate who would have voted against the stimulus and fought against it? Or do you want someone who would have voted for the stimulus?
First, for the record, I would have voted against the stimulus. What the stimulus did was rewarded bad behavior by our financial institutions. Bottom line. It was sold to you that it was needed in order to save this economic system that we have. That's partly true, because the economic system that we currently are built on right now is built on lies. And that is what would have collapsed. And because we've bailed those people out, that the bad movement or the bad actions, the criminal actions of these corporations were allowed to flourish. That's why we shouldn't have done this. We should have let it fail. If we would have let it fail, it would have rebuilt. We would have been able to rebuild this country. Instead, we've settled ourselves with trillions of dollars in debt. The numbers that they're talking about aren't even accurate. It's trillions and trillions of dollars that have been spent. And we still don't know where this money went. That's why we need to have a full audit of the Federal Reserve as well. Because that's who stole our money. That's why neither one of those parties understands what we're up against. They're arguing over, well, should you have, shouldn't have, or should you have, should have. Not only should you have, not have, because they're talking about another plan, some kind of alternative plan that would have still bailed out the banks. And what did the banks do with that money? They bought up other banks. They consolidated themselves. Don't let any crisis go to waste, I guess is what they say. The choice is pretty clear in this election. You have career politicians that are taking us down the same path that we've been going down. Just adjusting the speed, that's all it is. And you have regular citizens that are saying, we need to reverse course. Thank you.
Well, first, the American people need to know how we got in the problem. They got in the mess to make us deceived into thinking we needed stimulus. To start off with this fiat currency that the Federal Reserve is printing. They printed out of paper and ink. It cost 3 cents a bill. There's nothing back in it. It costed nothing to print it. And then loan it to the banks, doing the thing called fractional reserve lending, where they can print 10 times the currency off what they have on reserve. So then they charge interest on this money. They wind up collecting over 1,000% interest on every dollar they print, which we pay. The money the government borrowed for the stimulus, that they paid back to the bankers they borrowed it from, we got to pay interest on it. That, with the corporate citizenship of the United States has to pay the interest on it. That's why the 16th Amendment only refers to persons and citizens of the United States as a corporate income tax. People don't realize that they can't tax a man's income. Declaration of Independence makes clear that they're being taxed as a corporation. They ain't got past that yet. They're still working on that since 1913. Trying to figure that one out. But basically the whole thing, okay, the IRS branch of the Federal Reserve, which is also private, they just ain't figured that one out yet either, has been given tax grants since World War II, paying for almost 50 million of our jobs to relocate, our factories to relocate in other countries. So if you want to fix the problem, first you're going to have to stop paying our factories to leave the country. We've paid almost 50 million of our jobs to relocate in third world countries. Now how are we going to stimulus that back? You've got to restructure the middle class. You can't stimulate it. You need to go back to print your own currency, interest-free, the greenback dollar. That's the only time that we didn't have bankers in our system. That's how we kept England and France from invading us during the Civil War. That was on both of our borders. Is we printed our own currency and financed our own war interest-free. We need to get back to printing our own currency. Thank you.
Next topic is on foreign policy, gentlemen. Newt Gingrich called for covert operations to destroy the only refinery in Iran that was capable of producing gas. The intent was to generate regime change to a more friendly regime for the United States. I'd like you to comment on that as a foreign policy? Do you support that kind of foreign policy? And explain to us why, please.
One interview, Newt Gingrich said that he called for covert operations, U.S. engagement